everyone, welcome to Keto and Crime. I'm coming to you from the beautiful Appalachian Mountains in northeastern Tennessee. We're here for a little getaway as well as some work stuff I have to do. So I do apologize for missing a couple of days of the Daybell trial. I am back now with day 22 and 23. I am way behind listening to the recordings and reading the notes. So what I'm going to do is do 2 a day until I get caught up. So just bear with me. So today we're going to handle days 22 and 23. As you'll recall from our day 21 video, Iyun Pawlowski was on the stand when court was adjourned, and he is on the stand again as day 22 gets underway. We still have a sidebar going on. Basically, the defense wants Iyun's testimony struck because they say he's been influenced by, news and commentary and things like that. So that was starting to be argued as soon as court took up. The main point of argument is that he dated Melanie Boudreau, who is Lori Vallow's niece, for about 2 weeks, married her, and then immediately became a snitch. That's what they're saying. But you know what, Mr. Archibald? If your clients hadn't been up to evil shenanigans, it wouldn't have mattered if there was a snitch. Now, would it? So, whatever. They want some recordings played that Iyun evidently did when he gave statements to the police, as well as recording conversations between he and Melanie. He wants to play these tapes for these recordings for the court. The prosecution takes the side that it's, not good to refer to him as a snitch. He was simply answering the questions. The defense is saying that religious, they're poo-pooing on their religious freedom if they use their doctrine against them, whereas the state is saying that their particular doctrine is 100% linked to the crimes that they're accused of committing. So it's a whole lot of argument back and forth. They have a sidebar when it first opens, and then they end up retiring to judges' chambers to debate whether or not these secret recordings of he and Melanie can be played. Eventually, after the little brief recess, the judge rules that they are hearsay and cannot be admitted. He says that if Iyun, on cross-examination, pretty much, because he's heard them, the judge has heard them, contradicts what's in them, then they can be played as part of, redirect or what have you. And so at this time, Iyun is brought back into the courtroom and is put up for John Thomas to cross-examine. So instead of going after him for a summer job he had, he simply talks to Iyun about how he met Melanie. He explains that they met in November of 2019. They dated 10 days before getting married in Las Vegas. I don't even want to get into the particulars of that madness. But anyway, Thomas reiterates that Iyun did ask Chad and Lori for permission to marry Melanie like she was some, virginal princess, whatever. And they talked about casting, things that Iyun had talked about before, and talking about potentially bugging of apartments, which wouldn't surprise me, but I don't know. Iyun says he recorded all of his conversations with his new wife for 2 weeks. Again, sketchy. And only he and the FBI knew, so he was evidently saving his own ass. He said he was, concerned about his children and his ex-wife, and I really can't blame him for going along with it, but it does make him, look like maybe he was, like the defense said, was just in it for the purpose of snitching. They then talk about December 12th, 2019, which is the day that 𝗟𝗏_𝗏 died. He said it was a significant day for Melanie, as Alex was her uncle. And he said he did talk to Chad and Lori that day via phone, but doesn't remember a whole lot of particulars about it. He said that Lori did tell Melanie to go to a place of safety, so she went to Ian's apartment, then went to the temple, and he recorded the entire conversation Melanie had with Chad and Lori. So pretty much we have weeks of conversation between Chad, Lori, and Melanie and Ian that were done by the FBI. Ian said that he was just trying to help find 𝗙lie and JJ. He said there were 9 recordings in all, and he says he's never listened to them with law enforcement. He only knows what he recalled from the actual phone calls and conversations. And he said the last time he was summoned for a grand jury testimony about this case, he heard about 10 minutes of the recordings total. He said the snippets he heard included conversations with Melanie, Alex, Lori, and Chad. One time, Melanie was sick and asked, I guess, for some sort of blessing, and there was talk of a spiritual attack and folding Satan into a taco. That's a mighty spicy taco. He said that Ian gave Melanie a blessing when Alex. These people are really into blessings, but it doesn't seem to help anyone. I'm just saying. Then he talks about how people in Melanie's life took advantage of her. Then they talked about Brandon being ruled, her ex-husband being ruled as dark. And then basically you have Thomas berating Ian for his lack of knowledge of anything, including their theology. He then confirmed that Melanie spoke to 𝗙𝗪𝗻 the day that Alex died, and that this was confirmation of a spiritual attack. They talk about how Chad and Lori said they would put Shields' blight around Melanie after Alex died, and that Ian remembers touching Melanie as part of one of these blessings. And then Thomas has no further questions. Blake has no redirect, and so he's released from the stand, but remains under subpoena. The next witness called by the prosecution is Taylor Ballard. He's a health insurance broker in Rexburg that Chad Daybell was a client of. According to Ballard, he met with Chad on October 31st, 2019. He came in about obtaining health insurance, and because the health insurance had expired, because of his wife's policy, because she was the breadwinner, and Chad wanted insurance for him and some of his adult children. Now, I'm not going to get into particulars of that, but I do know because of Obamacare, you can carry children on health insurance up until age 26, but it still seems weird that he would come in asking for adult children unless it was, the one that lived with them or the one that was on mission. I can understand that, but the married children, that seems a little far-fetched. Chad pretty much said that his income for 2020 was going to look different now that his wife was gone. Yeah, it's going to be zero because you made no money, Chins. And Ballard said that, told her that Ballard then told them that probably the best thing to do was to apply for Medicaid, and they would help them do that, to apply for it starting in January of 2020. And in the meantime, he arranged for temporary insurance for Chad and one child for November and December. However, after Chad brought in their IRS tax returns, it was ruled that they were not qualified for Medicaid and instead received a tax credit to help them purchase private insurance. November 21st, Ballard texted Chad, asked him to come in to discuss coverage options. He told them that he was about to get married, but it would not be a problem to add any spouse to any coverage that they buy. And that at that time they confirmed it was just him and son Mark, which was the one on mission, that needed coverage. He then emailed Chad all the options for coverage. And then John Thomas raises an objection saying they were not provided with these emails. They had the right to review all testimony, so there's a brief sidebar because the witness was looking at her email to refresh what she told Chad, and so now Thomas has taken this as this wasn't proper discovery. So eventually, Boyce overrules and says that she can look at her notes to refresh her memory, but must close them before actually giving the answer. Whatever. And then Ballard talks about how she gave law enforcement everything she had on Chad Daybell. And then another objection from the defense asked that she be excused as a witness because of her having to refer to her notes. Boyce takes a brief recess to review the insurance agent's files to see if they are, in fact, going to be used. Thomas, after the break, Thomas said he had a concern that the health insurance information was not provided to the defense. It was actually provided to Lori's prior attorney. And Thomas says he and 𝗟𝗏𝗍𝗵 have not had a chance to see it, but now have it. So the testimony of Ballard continues. She talks about a phone call she had with Chad in December of 2019. He said he called because he wanted to make sure to pay his premiums for January. I told him I never heard back from him on the email for the quote, so he's not chosen a plan. He went over options. They chose a plan. He only obtained insurance for him and Mark. And then on March 11th, he went into Ballard's office to basically talk about obtaining health insurance for Lori, who was incarcerated because she was arrested in Hawaii. And so at that time, they added dental coverage and health insurance for Lori, as well as dental for himself and Mark. Tawana Rowlings then asks, were they ever mention of any minor children, i.e. JJ and Tylee, that needed to be covered? And they said no. And at this point, the prosecution tenders the witness, and Thomas cross-examines. He asked Ballards what Chad's income was when he went in to buy insurance. She recalled Chad saying that his income without his wife was around $20,000. And at that point, she is dismissed. The next witness is Angela Yancey. She is a payroll and benefits administrator for Sugar-Salem School District. This is the district in which Tammy worked. She said that she conducted benefits meetings during the open enrollment period each year. It's different for every district, every company, but usually around the first of each year, last of the previous year, to get things going for the next year. She said that benefits were discussed along with life insurance options, and that open enrollment started in August and ran through the middle of September. She said that Tammy made a change to her life insurance plan in September 2019, and then they project her benefits package up. And this is a change to the voluntary life insurance. She went on to confirm that Tammy was hired by the school district in 2017. And at that time, she took out the minimum amount of life insurance, which was $10,000. She made no changes in 2018 and 2019. She requested an increase, signed the form, and Chad also signed it because he had elected for optional spousal coverage as well. This form was signed and dated September 8th, 2019. The increase went into effect on September 1st. Once the change went into effect, she said the maximum amount, which was 5 times her salary, was then added, which brought the life insurance to $130,000. Chad visited Yancey in her office about 2 days after Tammy's death. Yancey said that she had helped employee families with life insurance approximately 15 times, and in her experience, it was very unusual for Chad to come in so soon to claim life insurance. She said it was spooky. She explained to Chad that they could not submit any claims until a death certificate was obtained, and he basically told her, that's okay, I've already ordered 8 of them. Yancey said she had never heard of anybody ordering that many. The most she had ever seen in any claim that she had helped file was 3. She said that Chad returned on October 25th, but she was out of town. He was told to come back on October 30th. On October 30th, he returned with a beneficiary statement. Yancey completed the form, attached the death certificate and all the information, and submitted it to their life insurance carrier. and for the full $130,000. And of course, as we know, it was paid, even though now he's being charged with insurance fraud. And now the prosecution has no further questions, and so John Thomas will now cross-examine Yancey. Thomas then asks if Chad came in with Tammy to go over the changes to the life insurance. She said not that she recalled, and then they go over the entire history of Tammy's benefits again. He does ask for some confirmation about how much was paid and for what. She said for the $10,000 basic insurance plan, the employees paid a little over $1 a month. For $75,000, it was around $14 a month, and about double that for the full $130,000. And then after that, Thomas tenders the witness. The next witness is Detective Colin Nesbitt from the 𝗙𝗂𝗃 Police Department, with Rachel Smith questioning. He explains his background and history with the department. He said that on January 25th, 2020, he was assisting Rexburg police in serving a legal document to Lori Vallow. He said that some of the representatives from the Rexburg did fly over to Hawaii with and gave assistance in helping to serve Lori. They located Lori at a condo in Princeville. She was in the pool area with Chad. Nesbitt went with another detective and lieutenant to serve Lori the papers. They gave her a copy of the papers and asked if she had any questions. The interaction was recorded and given to Rexburg police. Smith then admits a thumb drive with the video recording, and then the body cam footage from the Kauai police is then played. It shows Chad and Lori lying by the pool. They give Lori the paperwork, ask her if she has any questions. Chad sits up and leans over. Lori said she didn't have any questions, and the officers leave. And so the video ends. Again, that paperwork was served on January 25th, 2020, and then a search warrant for their vehicle, which was parked at the Princeville condo, was executed on the 26th. The car was not there when they went to execute, but they were able to execute a traffic stop on them about 30 minutes from the condo and searched it then. Again, you've seen the body cam footage from that search. It's all over the internet, and then they were able to search, and at that point, Nesbitt says that he found a credit card with 𝗙ice's name on it in Lori's purse and took notice because he knew 𝗙ice was missing. All the evidence from that was bagged and tagged, and then Smith acts to admit 26 different photos from that search. All those photos are shown, and the detective goes over all of them in pretty good detail. They talk about the two computers, the credit cards, birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificate, rental agreement, patriarchal blessings, a book called Visions of Glory, which written by Chad. The next photo, the main photo that brought in the most attention was the fact that there were 14 to 15 copies of Charles Vallow's death certificate. Then there was a photo of JJ's birth certificate, and then JJ and 𝗙ice's Social Security card, as well as their school ID cards, at least JJ's from the elementary school, birth certificate for 𝗙ice, and then a second birth certificate for JJ. The prosecution tenders the witness. John Thomas will cross-examine. Of course, he goes over his background. And then he questions him more about what they were looking for. He says they were looking for evidence of the children, where those children might be. They talk more about 𝗙ice's credit card and asked if there was any trace evidence on or near it. Nesbitt says he does not know. They talk about the birth certificates and the other documents. Nesbitt said it was all taken according to police procedure and basically photographed and tagged and submitted as evidence. Then they talk about the envelope of money that contained around $5,500, and he said that was also held procedurally Thomas has no further questions, and so Smith will redirect. She asks Nesbitt if there were any signs that the children were staying at the condo in Hawaii. He says no. He asks her how many bikes were in the vehicle that they pulled over, and they show a photo showing that there was one adult bike in the cargo area. There was no evidence that the children were in the car, and that there was practically no evidence of children anywhere. There wasn't even a place for them to sit. Next witness is Officer Ryan Pillar, who was a Chandler, Arizona officer back in 2007. Of course, the defense objects, saying that nothing from Arizona should be admitted. It is overruled. He explains his professional background and how in 2016 he moved to the Special Victims Unit. In 2019, he moved to the Biocrimes Unit and was responsible for investigating violent crimes like robberies and homicide. And then in 2021, he moved back to being a patrol officer. He said he recalls in October of 2019, he was in a meeting with other detectives when they learned of a shooting. This was the Brandon Boudreaux shooting, and he was assigned to be a primary investigator on that case. He said on that day, he interviewed Brandon. He said that Brandon had left the house with 4 kids that morning. He dropped 3 off at school and took the last child to his ex-wife's home. He then went to the gym with friends, and after he returned home, he said that is when someone in a Jeep took a shot at him, and he immediately called 911. They then talk about the ties of Alex to the Jeep, as well as Alex's cell phone and email address being located in the area of Boudreaux's house on that day. They talk about how they interviewed all the potential witnesses and persons of interest, and then how that turned into them assisting with trying to locate JJ and Tylee. They then move into the welfare check of the children in Rexburg, which Arizona police did request, and some other particulars that we've also learned about, as well as how much life insurance, or how much Melanie Boudreaux received in the divorce settlement from Brandon Boudreaux. We've learned that it was around $300,000. At that point, he is dismissed from the stand. That was his direct and cross-examinations. And then basically the jury is excused as they go into evidentiary hearing that the jury does not need to see, and then they review those as far as some further information the defense and the prosecution wants admitted, and that's what takes up the majority of the rest of the afternoon. And at that point, court is adjourned, and we will now pick up with day 23, which was this last Friday, the 5th. And it was only a half day, so we should get through this pretty quick. And then on my next video, I will do Monday and Tuesday of week 5, and then I should be caught up back to only a 1-day delay. I appreciate your patience. Friday, May 5th, day 23, starts with FBI agent Doug Hart. It was his evidence that required all the evidentiary proceedings of the previous day. So we begin with Rachel Smith questioning FBI agent Doug Hart. They go over his qualifications. They talk about all the evidence that he's presenting was taken from the Lori for Style and Lolly Time email addresses, and they also go over a lot of text messages that were taken from that famous iCloud dump. Again, the defense objects, saying that none of this evidence should be admitted because it's outside of what Mr. Hart can testify to. They talk about how they have already received all this evidence, they knew it was there, and they will only be questioning him as far as what he investigated. So Boyce and the lawyers are basically arguing. They are objecting to approximately 18 different pages of that. So Boyce has a very long sidebar in which the jury is not brought in for. They ask Hart if he has reviewed or read any witness testimony. He says no. He's merely going from the investigation that he did. Archibald also does some questioning about his background and things like that. And then finally, Boyce said there has been no violation of the exclusionary rule, and Hart will testify along with all the exhibits, and then the jury is brought in. The prosecution goes over his qualifications again. He's an FBI special agent from 1995 to 2022. He explains he attended the FBI Academy, and his first assignment was investigating conspiracy homicides and drugs in Hawaii. He then spent 7 years on the Nez Perce Reservation investigating violent crimes, and then transferred to the Boise, Idaho Field Office and supervised Violent Crime Task Force. He was promoted to senior supervisor agent and has served in reigns over 34 counties in southern Idaho. They then go into what it took to become an agent on the Native American reservation, and he talks about a lot of that training and how they have to adhere to tribal custom. And he said that he's helped investigate over 50 crimes against children, many of them missing or abducted. Also talks a little bit about his background with exhuming bodies and how the FBI does that. He said that the FBI's policy on when a child goes missing is that they work with state and local law enforcement to help find them immediately, because they always suspect they've perhaps been taken over state lines, which makes it an FBI matter. He then talks about if a child is taken, usually death occurs within 24 hours if death is the goal, which usually it is. He said you have a very small window to find a child alive. And then they bring in the evidence that has caused all this shenanigans of the morning, and it is all of Lori's Lollytime iCloud account. And they basically project that up and begin to go over it piece by piece. Again, the defense objects, and it is overruled. And they are again saying that they didn't have time to go over it all. They say they were, given all this stuff. So anyway, he then talks about, Agent Hart then talks about the special unit called CARD, which is the Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team, and that this is the division that was overseeing this investigation. He said he got involved with the Daybell case on November 27th, 2019, and immediately deployed through CARD. And then he talks about all the cell phone activity and iCloud activity that we are arguing about. They then talk about photos that are being shown of when JJ was found, his burial site. He talks about his history with having to exhume children's bodies and what they look for, the absence of vegetation, disturbed earth, other things. They then talk about how they got all of the cell phone and email evidence, and he explains the warrants and how they get all that stuff and how they look at it. Basically, they ask about all the communication. He talks about how the Lollytime account has a lot fewer files than 𝗿𝗏𝗄 He talks about the 𝗿𝗏𝗄 email being created around April of 2009, around 2019. Excuse me, Lollytime was created around April 2019. 𝗿𝗏𝗄 was created in December of 2000, so it's a far older account. And he talks about how they got all those records, all the exhibits that they logged, they put them into different categories: voicemail versus text versus email versus photos versus voicemail, etc. They talk about how they were able to extract all this information, as well as he believes it took them over 200 hours to go through everything. The most telling were communications between Lori and Chad saying they wanted to get married, and how Chad and Lori used the word obstacles to refer to JJ, Tylee, Charles, and Tammy, as well as all the financial information regarding the relationship between Alex Cox, Lori, and Chad, as well as the Social Security payments that were done fraudulently attributed to JJ and Tylee. And then some communications between Lori and Alex. And for the rest of the morning, as I said, this is a half day. They talk about all the communications between Lori, Chad and Lori, Chad and Alex, and how they seem to be leading up to some sort of big payoff, how they alluded to they were going to get married, they were married in a past life, all the stuff that we've had before that really shows that they referred to Tammy and the children as obstacles. And, you know, I could draw that out and go into a long 20-minute harangue about all was said. Let's just say it was despicable. And so that brings us to where we are now, 3 people dead. And so that pretty much summed up Friday, day 23, the last day of week 4. Tomorrow's video will be Monday and Tuesday of this current week, so week 5, days 24 and 25, and then I should be caught up. And so with that being said, until next time, keto and crime.